A rare and emotional moment. President Hakainde Hichilema speaks from the heart, asking, "Why do they paint me as the bad person?" In a country divided by politics and emotion, this speech is striking a national nerve. In a heartfelt moment, President Hakainde Hichilema expressed deep emotion over the public perception that he is a villain in Zambia's current political crisis. Broken heart, why does HH feel misunderstood? Speaking head, what triggered this emotional statement? Fire, is this a turning point in Zambia's political narrative? Find out the full story and Zambians' reactions only on InspirAfrica Official. Zambia, a nation known for its relative political stability in southern Africa, has experienced significant political shifts since the 2021 general election, when Hakainde Hichilema, leader of the United Party for National Development (UPND), defeated incumbent President Edgar Lungu of the Patriotic Front (PF). Hichilema's presidency has been marked by ambitious promises to restore democracy, revive the economy, and promote unity. However, his tenure has also faced challenges, including economic hardships, accusations of authoritarianism, and tensions with the opposition. Recently, an emotional statement by President Hichilema has sparked widespread discussion, raising questions about his leadership, public perception, and Zambia's political future. 1. Why does HH feel misunderstood? Hakainde Hichilema's sense of being misunderstood stems from a complex interplay of personal, political, and societal factors. As a leader who campaigned on a platform of change, transparency, and economic revival, Hichilema has faced high expectations from Zambians weary of the corruption and mismanagement associated with the previous PF government. However, his presidency has been met with mixed reactions, leading to a perception that his intentions and actions are not fully appreciated or accurately interpreted by the public, media, and political opponents. Historical context of Hichilema's political journey. Hichilema's political career spans over 2 decades, during which he contested 6 presidential elections: 2006, 2008, 2011, 2015, 2016, and 2021, before finally winning in 2021 with 59.02% of the vote. His persistence earned him a reputation as a determined opposition leader, but it also exposed him to significant adversity. Under Edgar Lungu's PF government, Hichilema faced 17 arrests, including a 2017 treason charge for allegedly endangering Lungu's life during a motorcade incident, a charge widely criticized as politically motivated attempt to silence him. These experiences have left Hichilema with a deep awareness of the personal risks he took to ascend to power, fostering a belief that his sacrifices for democracy are under-acknowledged. High expectations and economic realities. Upon taking office, Hichilema inherited a struggling economy characterized by high debt, estimated at over $12 billion externally, inflation, and unemployment. His administration secured an IMF bailout and implemented austerity measures, such as reducing fuel subsidies, to stabilize the economy. However, these policies have led to increased living costs, particularly for fuel and food, exacerbating public discontent. Hichilema likely feels misunderstood because he views these measures as necessary for long-term recovery, yet they have been met with criticism from citizens expecting immediate relief. For instance, in a 2022 press conference, Hichilema emotionally cataloged his persecution under the PF, suggesting that his focus on past grievances was meant to highlight the contrast between his administration's commitment to rule of law and the PF's authoritarianism. Critics, including supporters like Laura Mitty, argued that this focus was irrelevant to current challenges, reinforcing Hichilema's perception that his narrative is not resonating. Media and opposition narratives. The Zambian media, while freer under Hichilema than during Lungu's tenure, has been critical of his administration's performance. Outlets like News Diggers and the Zambian Observer have highlighted issues such as load shedding, delayed infrastructure projects, and perceived political vendettas against PF members. The opposition, particularly the PF, has capitalized on these challenges, accusing Hichilema of targeting Lungu's allies through anti-corruption investigations. This narrative portrays Hichilema as vindictive rather than reformist, further deepening his sense of being misunderstood. Hichilema's frustration may also stem from the opposition's disinformation campaigns, which a UN expert noted in January 2025 as contributing to public confusion and tension. For example, PF leaders like Rafael Nakasinda have faced charges for defaming Hichilema, which the opposition frames as suppression of free speech, while Hichilema's government sees it as holding detractors accountable for spreading falsehoods. Tribal and regional perceptions. Zambia's political landscape has historically been influenced by tribal and regional affiliations. Hichilema, an ethnic Tonga from southern province, has faced accusations of tribalism, particularly from PF supporters who claim his administration favors Tonga-dominated regions. Hichilema has worked to counter this narrative by emphasizing national unity and appointing diverse officials, but lingering perceptions of tribal bias may contribute to his feeling that his efforts to govern inclusively are overlooked. Personal leadership style. Hichilema's business background as a successful entrepreneur shapes his leadership style, emphasizing discipline, efficiency, and long-term planning. However, his insistence on fiscal responsibility and his occasional tardiness at public events have drawn criticism, with some viewing him as out of touch with ordinary Zambians' immediate needs. Hichilema may feel that his pragmatic approach is misconstrued as elitism or indifference. In summary, Hichilema's sense of being misunderstood arises from the gap between his vision for Zambia, rooted in his personal sacrifices, economic reforms, and commitment to democracy, and the public's perception, shaped by economic hardships, opposition narratives, media scrutiny, and historical tribal tensions. This disconnect fuels his emotional appeals for understanding. 2. What triggered this emotional statement? While the specific emotional statement referenced in the query is not explicitly detailed in the provided sources, the context suggests it relates to Hichilema's response to the controversy surrounding the funeral and burial arrangements of former President Edgar Lungu, who died on June 5, 2025. This event, coupled with ongoing political tensions, likely triggered an emotional outburst from Hichilema, reflecting his frustration with public and opposition criticism. The Edgar Lungu funeral controversy. Edgar Lungu's death at age 68 in South Africa marked a pivotal moment in Zambian politics. Lungu, a polarizing figure who led Zambia from 2015 to 2021, remained influential in the opposition PF despite his 2021 electoral loss and a constitutional court ruling barring him from running again in 2026. His death sparked a dispute over his funeral arrangements, with Lungu's family reportedly requesting that Hichilema not attend the funeral and expressing a desire to bury Lungu in South Africa to ensure dignity and peace. Hichilema's government, however, insisted that Lungu, as a former head of state, should be buried in Zambia with state honors, leading to a public and legal standoff. Hichilema's condolence message called for solemnity, unity, and compassion, but the family's lawyer, Makibi Zulu, revealed Lungu's belief that Hichilema's administration had mistreated him, including stripping his retirement benefits and targeting his family in anti-corruption probes. This accusation likely stung Hichilema, who has framed his anti-corruption efforts as essential for national recovery. The funeral dispute became a flashpoint, with Hichilema's critics accusing him of insensitivity and political vendetta, while his supporters argued that he was upholding national traditions. Hichilema's emotional statement may have been triggered by this criticism, as he sought to defend his administration's actions while expressing grief over Lungu's death and frustration at being portrayed as antagonistic. Broader political pressures. The funeral controversy unfolded against a backdrop of heightened political tensions ahead of the 2026 general elections. Hichilema's administration has faced challenges in delivering on economic promises, with load shedding increasing to 19 hours daily due to energy shortages and rising costs of living. These issues have fueled opposition narratives that Hichilema's government is failing, amplifying public discontent. Moreover, Hichilema's anti-corruption campaign, while praised by international partners, has been criticized domestically as selectively targeting PF members. The seizure of properties linked to Lungu's family and the suspension of 3 constitutional court judges in September 2024, just before a hearing on Lungu's electoral eligibility, reinforced perceptions of political retribution. These actions likely intensified Hichilema's sense of being unfairly judged, prompting an emotional defense of his leadership. Personal and historical grievances. Hichilema's emotional response may also reflect personal grievances rooted in his treatment under Lungu's government. The 2017 treason charge, excessive police force against UPND supporters, and restrictions on his 2021 campaign left deep scars. While Hichilema has avoided direct retaliation against Lungu personally, the funeral dispute may have reopened old wounds, leading him to express frustration that his efforts to govern fairly are overshadowed by past rivalries. Public and media scrutiny. The Zambian media's coverage of the funeral saga, coupled with social media amplification, likely added pressure. Outlets like Sun FM TV reported on emotional reconciliations, such as Socialist Party leader Fred Membie's attendance at Lungu's burial, contrasting with Hichilema's absence. Social media platforms, noted for disinformation, may have spread narratives portraying Hichilema as callous, prompting him to address the public emotionally to clarify his stance. In conclusion, Hichilema's emotional statement was likely triggered by the Edgar Lungu funeral controversy, exacerbated by ongoing economic challenges, opposition attacks, personal grievances, and media scrutiny. This moment encapsulated the broader tensions defining his presidency. 3. Is this a turning point in Zambia's political narrative? The emotional statement and the surrounding controversy over Edgar Lungu's funeral have significant implications for Zambia's political narrative, but whether they constitute a definitive turning point depends on how Hichilema, the UPND, the opposition, and the public navigate the aftermath. Below, I explore the factors suggesting a potential shift and those indicating continuity. Factors suggesting a turning point. Weakening of the opposition. Lungu's death has left the PF fragmented, with internal leadership struggles among figures like Miles Sampa, Given Labinda, and Robert Chabinga. The PF's reliance on Lungu's charismatic authority, rather than strong institutional structures, makes it vulnerable to further splits, potentially strengthening Hichilema's UPND ahead of the 2026 election. If the opposition fails to unite, Zambia could drift towards single-party dominance, altering the multi-party democratic framework established since 1991. Public reflection on leadership. The funeral dispute has sparked public debate about leadership, reconciliation, and national unity. Hichilema's emotional appeal may prompt Zambians to reassess his presidency, particularly if he leverages the moment to address economic grievances and demonstrate inclusivity. The controversy has also highlighted the dangers of political vengeance, potentially pushing voters to demand demand more constructive governance. International scrutiny. Zambia's international partners, including the EU, US, and IMF, have supported Hichilema's democratic and economic reforms. However, concerns about authoritarian tendencies, such as the suspension of judges and arrests of opposition leaders, have drawn criticism from human rights groups. The funeral saga, if perceived as mishandled, could intensify global scrutiny, forcing Hichilema to adjust his approach to maintain donor support. Shift in political discourse. The emotional statement and funeral controversy have shifted focus from policy issues to personal and symbolic conflicts. This could redefine Zambia's political narrative, emphasizing reconciliation over retribution. If Hichilema successfully navigates this moment, he could cement his image as a unifying leader, altering the narrative of UPND-PF rivalry. Factors suggesting continuity. Entrenched political divisions. The UPND-PF rivalry, rooted in historical grievances and tribal perceptions, is deeply entrenched. The funeral dispute has reinforced these divisions, with PF supporters viewing Hichilema's actions as vindictive and UPND supporters defending him as upholding national protocol. Without significant reconciliation efforts, the narrative of animosity may persist. Economic challenges. Zambia's economic woes, including load shedding, high living costs, and climate-related agricultural disruptions, remain the dominant public concern. Unless Hichilema delivers tangible improvements, the funeral controversy may be a fleeting distraction rather than a transformative moment. Opposition resilience. Despite Lungu's death, the PF and other opposition parties, such as the Socialist Party, have shown resilience in mobilizing against Hichilema. If a new opposition leader emerges to unify the PF or a coalition like the TANS Alliance gains traction, the competitive political landscape could remain unchanged. Hichilema's leadership style. Hichilema's pragmatic, business-oriented approach has been consistent since taking office. His emotional statement, while notable, aligns with previous instances of defending his record, such as the 2022 press conference. Unless he adopts a markedly different strategy, the political narrative may continue along its current trajectory. Potential outcomes. The funeral controversy and Hichilema's emotional response could mark a turning point if they lead to a reconfiguration of the opposition, either through PF fragmentation or coalition building, a public demand for reconciliation and accountability, reshaping voter priorities in 2026, policy adjustments by Hichilema to address economic and democratic concerns, strengthening his mandate. However, if economic challenges persist, political divisions deepen, or the opposition regroups effectively, the moment may reinforce existing tensions rather than transform the narrative. In conclusion, while the emotional statement and funeral dispute have the potential to be a turning point, their long-term impact depends on Hichilema's ability to address public grievances, the opposition's response, and Zambia's economic trajectory. The coming year will be critical in determining whether this moment reshapes Zambia's political landscape. 4. What was the emotional moment and what triggered it? As noted earlier, the specific content of Hichilema's emotional statement is not fully detailed in the sources, but the context strongly points to his response to the Edgar Lungu funeral controversy. Below, I reconstruct the likely emotional moment and its triggers based on available information. The emotional moment. The emotional moment likely occurred during a public address, press conference, or social media statement in June 2025, following the dispute over Lungu's funeral arrangements. Hichilema may have expressed grief over Lungu's death while defending his administration's insistence on a state burial in Zambia. His statement probably emphasized unity, respect for national traditions, and frustration at being accused of insensitivity or political vendetta. Given Hichilema's history of emotional appeals, such as the 2022 press conference where he detailed his persecution under the PF, this moment may have included personal reflections on his struggles and a plea for understanding. For example, Hichilema's condolence message after Lungu's death called for solemnity, unity, and an outpouring of love and compassion, suggesting an attempt to rise above political divisions. However, the family's rejection of his attendance and accusations of mistreatment likely prompted a more emotional defense, possibly highlighting his efforts to govern fairly despite past grievances. Triggers of the emotional moment. Funeral dispute. The primary trigger was the public and legal conflict over Lungu's burial. Lungu's family, citing his wish for Hichilema's absence, sought to bury him in South Africa, while Hichilema's government pushed for a state funeral in Zambia. This standoff, amplified by media and social media, placed Hichilema in a difficult position, balancing respect for Lungu's legacy with national protocol. Accusations of vendetta. Lungu's family and PF supporters accused Hichilema of targeting Lungu through anti-corruption probes, property seizures, and the loss of retirement benefits. These claims, echoed by Lungu's lawyer Makibi Zulu, likely provoked Hichilema to defend his integrity and intentions emotionally. Personal history with Lungu. Hichilema's 17 arrests under Lungu, including the 2017 treason charge, created a deep personal rivalry. The funeral dispute may have rekindled these memories, leading Hichilema to express frustration that his efforts to move past this history are not recognized. Public and media pressure. Critical media coverage and disinformation campaigns portraying Hichilema as insensitive likely intensified his emotional response. The contrast between his condolence message and the family's rejection may have pushed him to clarify his stance publicly. Political stakes. With the 2026 2026 elections approaching, Hichilema is under pressure to maintain public support amid economic challenges. The funeral controversy, if mishandled, risked alienating voters, prompting an emotional appeal to reaffirm his commitment to unity. In summary, the emotional moment was likely a public defense of Hichilema's actions during the Lungu funeral dispute, triggered by accusations of vendetta, personal grievances, media scrutiny, and political pressures. It reflected his struggle to balance personal emotions with presidential responsibilities. 5. Public reaction across Zambia. The public reaction to Hichilema's emotional statement and the Lungu funeral controversy has been diverse, reflecting Zambia's polarized political landscape, regional differences, and economic frustrations. Below, I analyzed the reactions based on available sources and inferred public sentiment. Polarized political reactions. UPND supporters. Hichilema's base, particularly in UPND strongholds like southern, western, and northwestern provinces, likely viewed his emotional statement as a sincere expression of grief and a defense against unfair criticism. Supporters argue that Hichilema's insistence on a state funeral honors Zambian traditions and that anti-corruption probes are necessary to address PF-era looting. Social media posts from UPND-aligned accounts may have praised Hichilema's restraint in not retaliating against Lungu personally, citing his commitment to rule of law. PF supporters. In PF strongholds like eastern, northern, and Luapula provinces, the reaction has been largely negative. Lungu's family's accusations of mistreatment resonated with PF supporters, who view Hichilema's actions as vindictive. The decision to push for a state funeral, despite the family's wishes, was seen as disrespectful, fueling anger. PF leaders like Robert Shabinga, who demanded a state funeral but criticized Hichilema's handling, likely amplified this sentiment. Other opposition groups, leaders like Fred Membi of the Socialist Party, who reconciled with Lungu before his death, criticized Hichilema's approach, arguing that Lungu should be buried by his friends. This suggests a broader opposition narrative framing Hichilema as divisive, potentially galvanizing anti-UPND sentiment. Regional and tribal dynamics. Zambia's regional and tribal affiliations shape public reactions. In Tonga-dominated southern province, Hichilema's emotional statement may have been seen as a justified response to PF attacks, reinforcing loyalty among his ethnic base. In Bemba-speaking regions like northern and Luapula, where Lungu had strong support, the statement likely deepened distrust, with some accusing Hichilema of tribalism. These divisions highlight the challenge of fostering national unity amid historical rivalries. Economic context. Public reaction is heavily influenced by economic hardships, with load shedding at 19 hours daily, rising fuel and food prices, and climate-related agricultural challenges. Many Zambians are frustrated with Hichilema's government. For some, the funeral dispute is a distraction from these pressing issues, leading to apathy or criticism of both Hichilema and the PF for focusing on symbolic conflicts. Others, particularly urban youth, may see Hichilema's emotional appeal as an attempt to deflect from economic failures. Media and social media amplification. The Zambian media has played a significant role in shaping public reaction. Outlets like Sun FM TV and Newsdiggers reported on the funeral saga, with some framing Hichilema's actions as insensitive and others defending his call for unity. Social media, noted for disinformation, has amplified polarized views, with hashtags and posts either supporting Hichilema's leadership or condemning his handling of the funeral. Civil society and religious leaders. Civil society groups, such as the Zambian Civil Liberties Union, ZCLU, urged the government to withdraw its court case over Lungu's burial, reflecting a desire for reconciliation. Religious leaders under the Christian Churches Monitoring Group have historically called for dialogue during political disputes, and they likely advocated for a peaceful resolution, influencing moderate public opinion. Urban versus rural divide. Urban areas like Lusaka and the Copperbelt, where economic challenges are acute, may have seen mixed reactions, with some praising Hichilema's anti-corruption efforts and others criticizing his focus on symbolic issues. In rural areas, where UPND's decentralization policies, e.g. K26 million per constituency, have had some impact, reactions may lean more favorable, though PF strongholds remain resistant. 6. Political context. PF versus UPND tensions. The tensions between the UPND and PF are central to understanding Hichilema's emotional statement and Zambia's current political landscape. These tensions, rooted in historical rivalries, ideological differences, and power struggles, have intensified since the 2021 election and Lungu's death in 2025. 7. Is HH truly misunderstood? Whether Hichilema is truly misunderstood requires examining his intentions, actions, and the factors shaping public perception. Below, I argue that Hichilema is partially misunderstood, but also bears responsibility for the disconnect with the public. Evidence supporting misunderstanding. Complex economic reforms. Hichilema's austerity measures, such as reducing fuel subsidies and securing an IMF bailout, aim to stabilize Zambia's economy but have caused short-term hardships. Many Zambians, focused on immediate needs, may not grasp the long-term benefits, leading to criticism that Hichilema sees as unfair. Anti-corruption efforts. Hichilema's investigations into PF-era corruption are framed as accountability measures, but their selective targeting of Lungu's allies fuels perceptions of vendetta. vendetta. Hichilema may feel his commitment to justice is misconstrued as political revenge. Media and disinformation. The UN noted rising disinformation by opposition actors, which distorts Hichilema's actions. Social media narratives portraying him as tribal or authoritarian may amplify misunderstandings, particularly among PF supporters. Personal sacrifices. Hichilema's 17 arrests and perseverance through 6 elections reflect significant personal risk. His emotional appeals, like the 2022 press conference, suggest frustration that these sacrifices are not acknowledged. 8. Experts weigh in on HH's leadership. Experts on Zambian politics, governance, and democracy offer varied perspectives on Hichilema's leadership, reflecting his achievements, challenges, and areas for improvement. Below, I synthesize insights from academic, civil society, and international sources. Academic perspectives. Nick Cheeseman, University of Birmingham. Cheeseman, a democracy scholar, notes that Hichilema's 2021 victory offered a window for democratic renewal, given his promises to reverse Lungu's authoritarianism. However, he warns that UPND's use of tactics like restricting opposition rallies mirrors PF practices, risking democratic backsliding. Cheeseman praises Hichilema's removal of political cadres, but cautions that economic challenges could undermine his mandate. Sishiwa Sishiwa, Zambian academic Sishiwa, a vocal critic, has criticized Hichilema's lengthy speeches and focus on past grievances as distractions from governance. He acknowledges Hichilema's economic reforms, but argues that their benefits are not reaching ordinary Zambians, fueling discontent. Sishiwa also raised concerns about the suspension of constitutional court judges, questioning judicial independence. Civil society voices. Laura Mitty, Human Rights Commission Mitty, a Hichilema appointee, has praised his restoration of civil liberties, such as removing violent cadres, but expressed disappointment at his communication style and focus on PF-era issues. She urges Hichilema to prioritize economic delivery and public engagement to maintain support. Law Association of Zambia, LAZ, criticized the 2024 suspension of constitutional court judges, arguing it undermines judicial independence. While supportive of Hichilema's anti-corruption efforts, LAZ has called for transparent and impartial investigations to avoid perceptions of bias. 9. Final thoughts. Should Zambia look deeper? Zambia stands at a critical juncture as it navigates the aftermath of Lungu's death, Hichilema's emotional statement, and the broader challenges of economic recovery and democratic consolidation. The question of whether Zambia should look deeper into these issues is not merely rhetorical. It is essential for the nation's future stability and prosperity. Why Zambia should look deeper. Reconciliation over retribution. The Lungu funeral controversy highlights the dangers of political vengeance. Zambia must confront its history of rivalry and tribalism to foster national unity. Hichilema's emotional statement, if followed by genuine reconciliation efforts, could catalyze this process. Economic imperatives. With load shedding, rising costs, and climate challenges, Zambians need clarity on Hichilema's economic strategy. Looking deeper means demanding transparent communication about reforms and their timelines, as well as policies to cushion vulnerable groups. Democratic health. Concerns about judicial interference, opposition harassment, and media restrictions require scrutiny. Zambia's democratic gains since 2021 are fragile, and citizens must hold Hichilema accountable to his promises. Opposition's role. Lungu's death has weakened the PF, but a strong opposition is vital for democratic checks and balances. Zambians should engage in dialogue about the opposition's future, encouraging coalition building and policy-driven competition. Public engagement. The polarized reactions to Hichilema's statement underscore the need for civic education and public participation. Zambians must look beyond partisan narratives to assess leaders based on performance and vision. How Zambia can look deeper. Judicial reforms. Strengthen judicial independence through transparent appointments and protections against executive interference. Civic education. Invest in programs to educate citizens about democratic rights, economic policies, and the importance of unity, reducing susceptibility to tribal and partisan divisions. Risks of not looking deeper. Failing to address these issues could lead to deepened political divisions, risking violence in 2026. Economic stagnation. Eroding public trust in Hichilema. Democratic backsliding. Undermining Zambia's reputation as a stable democracy. Opposition fragmentation. Weakening checks on UPND power. In conclusion, Zambia must look deeper into the issues raised by Hichilema's emotional statement and the Lungu funeral controversy. This requires collective action to promote reconciliation, economic progress, and democratic resilience, ensuring a unified and prosperous future. Conclusion. Hakainde Hichilema's emotional statement, likely triggered by the Edgar Lungu funeral controversy, reflects the complexities of his presidency democracy and Zambia's political landscape. His sense of being misunderstood stems from the gap between his reformist vision and public perception, shaped by economic hardships, opposition narratives, and historical rivalries. While the statement has the potential to reshape Zambia's political narrative, its impact depends on Hichilema's ability to address public concerns and foster unity. Public reaction is polarized, with UPND and PF supporters divided along ideological and regional lines. The UPND-PF tensions, rooted in historical grievances and power struggles, remain a defining feature of Zambian politics. Hichilema is both misunderstood and partly responsible for the disconnect, requiring better communication and democratic consistency to align his intentions. Experts praise Hichilema's reforms, but urge him to prioritize economic delivery, strengthen institutions, and avoid authoritarian tendencies. As the 2026 elections approach, the choices made by Hichilema, the opposition, and citizens will determine whether this moment marks a turning point or a continuation of existing divides.